I don't think it's entirely rational, but it's something that happens. It's just like, especially a country that has sort of imperial ambitions. They don't want to have any rival, even a potential rival. You could a country that potentially could defeat them, in a war. They don't want that. They don't want to have anybody. It's a rather extreme view of things, but it exists. And we've actually found it throughout history. I think I mentioned in an earlier program that Cato, the Roman politicians who would end every speech with "Carthagio delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed. Now, Carthage wasn't a direct threat to Rome at the time, but it was the only potential real rival to Rome in that part of the Mediterranean, maybe anywhere in the Mediterranean. And so he just was obsessed with destroying it. And in the end, Carthage was just utterly destroyed by Rome. They couldn't tolerate the presence of a rival power. And I think it's something similar that you see here. I mean, it's kind of hard to understand, but I guess people who lead countries are obsessed with power, and that's something they just can't tolerate, a rival power sometimes.
And apparently we have that same line of thinking within the U.S. deep State Department in terms of foreign policy with regards to Russia and China.
Right.
And particularly Russia right now, obviously. But that, if that line of thinking, can it be cured, or is it going to end?
I don't think so. You just don't see it. It seems like it just spreads and it grows, and it's just when they come up against, when they suffer setbacks, they don't reconsider and maybe modify or moderate their goals, but always seem to double down and they just push harder. And I think we're seeing that actually again in Russia, in the Ukraine war.
So where is this all going? Where is this? It sounds like what you're saying to me is that we're headed for some type of ultimate showdown that could lead to the end of the world. But then I go outside and I talk to regular people that aren't as obsessed with the global affairs as I am, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. And there's and I'm thinking maybe I am crazy. Is this?
No, you're not. I mean, it's just again. First of all, I think it's always been true that just the average citizen of any country, especially maybe a country like America, which is so large and is between two oceans, we tend to think none of that really matters. And truth be told, it doesn't really matter as much for the U.S. as it does for a lot of other countries. In the end, it does matter. And especially if things go nuclear, it can matter a lot. Hang on just a second here. I'm going to...
Yeah, that light.
Okay.
I was going to say
finally
something.
Got a curtain. So
okay, good.
I want to demonstrate it for everybody. So you just have a lot of people who don't think it matters, just don't have an interest. And then it's just not reported. The way that it is reported is just like, there are bad people out there. And the only question is, should America be really tough and punish them or not? It's all very absurd and it's very detached from reality. And again, most people just don't dig below the surface. Some will do it on domestic news, but then they just always leave the foreign affairs. I've noticed that. There's some people that have kind of learned to be real dissidents on domestic issues, but they just simply trust what the authorities tell them on foreign affairs. That's quite common. But, that's what we and other people are about, is just like digging beneath the surface and actually leaving our bubble. It is a bubble. Most of the world sees it very differently. So it's not like we're some weird fringe people. In a way, you could argue that the U.S. and Western Europe, that's the fringe. That's the fringe thinking. And you're in that fringe bubble. And we've stepped out of it and we see the world as it is.
Yeah, after all these talks I've had with you, I increasingly view the world as the U.S.-led bloc, U.S. hegemony versus the multipolar world. And that's kind of how I've been framing things more and more. And what's happened in Syria felt like a severe blow to the multipolar world movement. Everything seemed to be going kind of gaining momentum behind BRICS in the multipolar world side. And it felt like everything was slipping. And then when the feeling I had, what happened with Syria, even though I don't really I'm still grappling with everything that's going on in Syria, and
Yeah.
just understanding just the little bit of history you fed me. It felt like, like your team lost a big game kind of
Yeah.
thing almost, And I was
Yeah.
wondering, why do I
Yeah.
have that feeling? Because
Yeah.
it,
Well, it is. It is. It obviously is a loss. I mean, it obviously is a blow to the Palestinian cause. To say it's a loss to multipolarism, maybe that's not really looking at it correctly. I mean, Syria wasn't a very important country. I think it was likely that Syria would have joined, BRICS or become an associate member or something over time. But it's not a very big player, so it's not particularly important, that matter. It's more of a regional matter. And here we saw some other forces at play. Sometimes I think we make it. I've noticed that, I think, with other pundits, that they kind of want to put everything into this fit it into the great struggle between Western hegemony and the multipolar world. And that is the great struggle. I agree, right? That is what really matters. But it's not every struggle. It doesn't explain every conflict, not by a long shot. And as we've explained, there was always something going on within the Middle East, and that is this Sunni Shia conflict, and that never went away. It was. It had shown signs of softening, and again, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they joined BRICS, and they made peace with Iran, and that was, so you could see how maybe the Sunni Shia conflict is sort of like peripherally or tangentially connected to the multipolar world, but that there's these local passions that can't be. It just doesn't really fit into that model so easily, but it can have consequences that are global. I think again we had the Sunni Shia split, and then we had Turkey and its own ambitions, and again these are local regional matters, and we're really just looking at the consequences.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the neocons were all still giving each other high fives all over DC. We did it. We got rid of Assad. It seemed like the regime change. We still got it. We can still do it. We can still topple governments. We can overthrow it. And I'm afraid that victory might make them a little more brazen and be like, right. we can still do this. We can,
right.
We can regime change Iran, no problem. Russia is a tough nut to crack, but we still got it. So we just got to keep pushing forward.
Right.
So it seems like their tanks were running a little bit low, in terms of like, maybe we can't do this. The U.S. is still losing power. And this kind of just what happened here, even though it's kind of unclear, the U.S. isn't giving a clear position on where it stands on this, but regime change was always the goal.
Yeah,
and they achieved it. Exactly. And so they're like, okay, great, we did this. The last one of the 7 is Iran. We can get them next.
Actually, they're really 2 of the 7, Iran and Lebanon.
Okay, Lebanon, right. So we get Lebanon next, have it, regime change it, and then we do Iran, and then we completely remade the Middle East. We still are, we show that we're top dog, and then we can focus on Russia or China. And or maybe it just made them more brazen already, because we just saw, right before we started this podcast, 6 attack of missiles were launched from Ukraine into Russia. Russia's vowed immediate response. It's like, I wonder if this has something to do with the fact the turmoil in Syria, they're feeling like
I don't think that has anything to do with that. But no, you're right. The neocons, probably are taking their victory lap now. Now, in an ordinary American who actually believed that it was something, that there was some kind of humanitarian impulse behind this, that we were doing this for the sake of human rights and the Syrian people, I think some of those people must be wondering right now, if they're paying any attention, because so far we've seen a lot of horrible things take place in Syria. But I think it probably does embolden the neocons. They were always obviously the most powerful faction. They always seemed to get what they wanted. Sometimes, different factions within the U.S. government would put up resistance. Like there was obviously resistance to the ATACMS strikes into Russian territory, pre-2014 territory. But they won, and now they're just going to be all the more powerful, all the more emboldened. They're going to push harder, you see already articles appearing saying, "Well, yeah, you see how Assad fell suddenly. It's probably going to happen to Putin. We just got to push a little harder." Of course, it's just nonsense. Of course, nobody, I think, including these neocons, really expect him to fall so suddenly. But we knew that Syria had been greatly weakened. Its economy had been hollowed out, and much of its territory was under the control of enemies, and none of that's true for Russia. It's just not. They're not analogous cases. But yeah, let's talk about the ATACMS strikes. When we were discussing the last Russian retaliation, of course there was first the Oreshnik strike, but then there was the destruction of the launchers, the HIMARS launchers that are used for launching ATACMS missiles in the Sumy region. I believe there were 5 launchers that were destroyed. And then a number of Western personnel, including quite a few Americans, were killed on a strike that same night. We said, and then we noticed, I think it was, for a good week or more after, that nothing had happened. So we speculated along with a lot of other people, what's going on here. Maybe finally, the Americans, NATO got the message and has decided to pull back and rethink this. But I also offered an alternative explanation, and that is that when those launchers were destroyed, actually their means for launching another attack in that area have been greatly degraded. And it was, because again, you can only launch one ATACMS missile with one of these launchers. So you would need to launch 6, you would need 6, and 5 were destroyed, right? So, and I think what happened suggests that the latter explanation was true, because this strike was launched from the Zaporozhia region. It hit, Tarangog. It was...
right, Taganrog.
Taganrog, you're right.
It's between Mariupol and Rostov-on-Don.
Yeah, closer to Rostov-on-Don, right. It's just it's a very northeastern corner of the Sea of Azov. So it's nowhere close to Kursk.
Right.
You could say with the Bryansky strike, which was the first one, well, that was very close to Kursk. So this is a clear escalation. They said, we're very limited. We're just doing this to protect the Ukrainian forces in Kursk. Now, you can't make the argument for this. They went after a military airfield. Apparently, 2 of the missiles were shot down by Russian air defense, and the remaining 4 were diverted from their flight, their program flight paths by electronic warfare. I think 1 or 2 did some damage, but nothing but superficial damage to the military installations there. I think just actually a number of parked cars may have been destroyed, and then 1 building slightly damaged. But yeah, it was a clear escalation, and it shows that they haven't given up. They're going to keep on escalating, and Russia will keep on responding. So we're still on this the escalation ladder.